Hi, I'm Susan, and welcome to Tasty Cakes, where I bake American desserts one recipe at a time. Today, I have another apple forward recipe for you, apple walnut cakes. And here we are, ready to go with this third dessert from the City Tavern Baking and Desserts cookbook. So, the first thing I'm going to do is turn the oven on to prep my walnuts. The recipe does not call for the walnuts to be toasted, but this is just my regular practice. Anytime I'm using any type of nut in a batter or a dough, toasting it just enhances the flavor. So those are in the oven, and I'm getting to creating my brown sugar. However, this brown sugar is going to be used as part of the sponge base for this cake, so I don't really have to blend it all that well before it goes into the stand mixing bowl. So that's ready to go. Before I do anything else, though, I remembered I needed to I needed to prep my baking pans. So normally it's butter and flour. I'm being a little bit lazy here, and I decide just to use a very neutral oil and a brush to spread it around, and then a little dab of flour into each of them before I apparently use my entire body to spread the flour around. The things that you learn when you watch yourself bake. Um, and you don't have to use flour. There's other things you can use like regular sugar or powdered sugar or even cocoa powder. Anything that you really want, things that you think will work well with a recipe. So now I'm getting back to the base of the sponge cake. Normally, it's sugar and eggs that's whipped together when you use the sponge method. And then you add the oil back in later, slowly, once the egg is whipped up with the sugar. In this case, the recipe called for me to add all three together and to just mix them all at the same time, which makes things easier. Um, One pro tip right here, I'm going to wash my hands. It's always a good idea to wash your hands right after you handle raw eggs so that you're not crossing, contaminating everything in your kitchen. So clean hands. Bowl goes on the stand mixer on low if you notice at first. It's always a good idea to start things on low. I've done this wrong one too many times until it's all blended, and then you can go ahead and turn it back on high to get the eggs whipping, sugar cutting in there, creating air pockets, all the good things. Once or as that is whipping, I am prepping my dry ingredients. You can see that I was carefully measuring out my flour there. Once I know that the sponge is done, turn that off as I pull together everything else. And clearly, I did not get all of my utensils ready before I started, which is always a good idea. Do as I say, not as I do here. In any case, oh, right. And then I get distracted because the nuts are done. So, always a good idea to not over toast your nuts. We don't want them to get a bitter taste. Like if you use or you leave your bread in the toaster too long, not very pleasant. Same thing with the nuts. So I can finally get back to finishing up with the dry ingredients. A healthy dose of cinnamon goes in there. And then baking soda is our leavener for this recipe. The molasses is our acidic ingredient to help that work. And then freshly ground nutmeg. I love to keep whole nutmegs and ground them when the moment when I need them. Just so much more um, delightful of a flavor, I guess you could say. So I've got my walnuts there. I'm going to chop those up to get them ready. One thing I want to point out, if you notice in front there's a metal bowl. Now you'll see it from the side. Those are my chopped apples that have been sitting in liquor for several hours. The recipe called for something called B&B liquor. I had to look that up. And apparently back in the 17 and 1800s, the term B&B liquor was just used for whatever house liquor any inn had uh, standing by. So I happen to have some brandy de Jerez, which is brandy made from sherry down in the southern part of Spain. So that's what those apples have been soaking in for several hours. And so now I'm at the point where I can put the dry ingredients back in very slowly. I'm going to keep a close eye on that because we just want them to come together. It's okay if you still see some dry parts of flour because that's going to get mixed in once I add the walnuts and the apples. I never want to waste any little bit of batter, so I'm being very careful to clean out that paddle. Give it one or two little folds to make sure everything's well blended, and then the walnuts go in. Again, a couple little folds, and then there are my apples. And there was a lot of extra juice there. That liquor pulled out some of the sugars. So I was really careful to not put any of the extra alcohol in. Number one, not needed. Number two, we didn't want to make the batter too liquidy because then our cakes would fall because there'd just be too much liquid. So batter's ready. It's actually came together quite easily, quite fast, not too difficult. Um, if I was being more exact today, I would have weighed my batter and known how much by weight I need to put in each tin, but nope, didn't do that. So I am eyeballing it, getting through. And then because obviously the thicker and heavier chunks of apple came out first, I do a little bit of apple redistribution at the end. You always want to have the equal amounts of apple for everybody who gets these cakes. Top up with some of that extra batter, make sure we're using it all. Don't want to waste anything. And then into the oven they go. 350, 375. Always put the timer on, check to see what's on the stove, do a little bit of cleanup. These guys took a while to bake because, as I said, it was a fairly liquidy batter. I think this was the third time I did the toothpick test because they'd been in for so long, but they just weren't ready to come out. Finally, I decide they are, and I can tell by the smell too, because it's just wafting through the kitchen, which is always a good sign. So there you have it. They're beautiful, tasting, smelling, lovely spiced flavors, some nice big chunks of apple and crunchy walnuts to sink your teeth into, and just super easy to come together. So there you have it. Thanks so much for stopping by. As always, like and subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I will see you at the next recipe. Have a great day.
Pero ese sí, mira. No,